We'll just give everyone some time to join us and then we'll get started in a minute or so. And while we wait, it would be great to hear actually how much experience you've got of action learning. So there's a poll ready for you if you want to place your votes. Oh, it's got a good mix of people. Quite a few people new to action learning. Yeah, we'll leave the poll going for a little bit longer, but I just welcome everybody and thanks for joining us today. We're thrilled to dive into the topic of action learning. It's something we're both very passionate about, and why it really truly matters for organisations, and looking not only to solve most pressing challenges, but also in a way that cultivates growth, innovation and resilience. So keep answering the poll so we can get a sense of where you are in terms of your experience of action learning. And also, if you've got any questions that you'd like us to explore over this webinar, then please ask them in our questions section, which you can find in the 3 dots, I would imagine. But use that and submit any questions that you've got, and we'll go through them after the main presentation. Also, during there, please do feel free to use the chat if you've got any points or agree with anything that we go through, just to keep it a little bit more interactive. And at the end of this, we will send you a recording of the webinar as well, if you'd like that. So thanks for answering the poll. It looks like we've got a good mix from mainly people who have got some experience versus also some quite new to that. So we will get on. Go. So a little bit about action learning, and we are the #1 provider in the UK. We are founded in 1998, so quite a while ago, by Ruth Cook, who is our current managing director. And we have the largest independent network of action learning professionals in the UK. Our mission is to drive transformational learning through our different experiences, and we've got a world of experience in the sense of facilitation, both face-to-face and virtual. We do it across private sector, public voluntary, and a lot around the cultural sectors in the UK, and we have been working globally as well. So we have trained and facilitated for a lot of clients, British Red Cross, British Council of Australia, Oxfam, Heineken, the Oxford University Press. So there's a real range of clients that we've worked with. And even our sort of high impact organisations around Barclaycard, Ernst & Young, Eurostar and NSPCC. So there's a wealth of experience we've had and companies we've worked with. So our commitment to transformation is not simply about training, it's about empowering organisations and people to navigate change, foster resilience and drive sustainable success through their learning, through action learning and how they utilise that. Our facilitators are a small group of people that we've worked with for a number of years, but also they're all experts in their own right and bring a wealth of practical knowledge, experience and insights in terms of how action learning can really support organisations in their real world challenges and really develop the collaborative and effective working practices. So that's Action Learning Associates. You've got 2 hosts today, myself. So I'm Charlotte Snowden, one of the directors here at Action Learning. And I've got, I guess, about 2 decades. I'm getting a bit older now, but ultimately my key specialism is learning development, organisational development, but operational leadership, training and coaching. So I've worked across a broad corporate range of sectors. So I've worked in telecommunications from everything everywhere. I've also worked in gas and utilities with BG and Centrica Energy. And I've worked with professional services. So I was worked at Irwin Mitchell Solicitors as a operationals lead there. And then finished my corporate career as a director of operations at BHP Law, a smaller law firm in the Northeast. I then transitioned into doing what I'm passionate about, which is action learning and coaching. And I've really sort of developed my skills from there in terms of my NLP skills. I'm a trainer of NLP, MBTI practitioner, but also for facilitation of training and specifically, obviously, in action learning. And I'll hand you over to my fellow director.
Hi everyone, great to be with you today. I'm Daisy Bland, co-director alongside Charlotte at ALA. My background's quite different. I started out in mental health services in the NHS, and from there moved across to social housing, mostly in and around London, and then on to homelessness services. So I worked frontline as a support worker and then into management and learning and development in homelessness services in London. And I've been in L&D since then, in organisations and then freelance, and then in the last 5 years with Action Learning Associates, and using action learning in my work for about 14 years, I think. I'm a real passionate advocate for it. I've seen it be so effective in so many different settings. I think it can create really exciting change. So we'll talk more about that today. But yeah, my background's mostly in charity sector, non-profit sector, universities, NHS, some armed forces work. I think we had some visitors from the armed forces joining us today, and social care. Yeah, so I look forward to talking to you about some of those things today.
So what is today? So the session is really to focus on the power of how you can unlock action learning, and it's a game changer for organisational growth, resilience and success. As we all experience, workplace demands really are changing, the complexity of them. We're getting problems left, right and centre, but also finding traditional approaches to problem solving often can fall short. So persistent issues like team conflict, leadership challenges and resistance to change can be really at the forefront of many organisations as they adapt and change to the economy at the moment. And they can't always be solved with surface level fixes or tactical fixes. They really do require something more dynamic and more adaptive. And I do think that action learning has a part to play within this. It's a proven method for elevating leadership capability. How do you foster real sort of team collaboration, driving longer lasting innovation and change within our organisation? So it does have approach to it, explore to really help that transformation process, and empowering leaders and teams to really solve their problems rather than waiting for something to be done to them, which is quite often what we find in traditional methods. So during today, we'll look at how action learning can help make that lasting change. We'll go through how it develops psychological safety, how it does enhance leadership development and build stronger and more accountable teams and leaders, and ultimately driving sustainable, innovative, and ultimately improving organisational performance, which most people will be interested in the sense of everything we try to do from an L&D perspective is about how do we develop individual and team performance. So I'll hand you over now to Daisy for just to give you a background of it.
Yeah, okay, so where did action learning come from? This character on your screen is Reginald Revens. You may have seen him before. He was an amazing guy, a polyglot. He was an Olympian, specialising in the high jump, which he won the silver medal for at the Olympics, but also a professor in astrophysics, working in quite a serious lab in Cambridge that won the Nobel Prize. And then where he really went on to make his name was as a management a learning consultant working in management development. It was when he was working in the coal pits as a leader in the 1940s that he developed action learning. What he observed is that when he sent people off to go and do training and development to help them get better at their jobs, they would watch the expert who had come in to train them doing their theoretical work on the chalkboard, and he'd watch all the people he'd paid to be there kind of zone out, not really listen, be very passive participants, and not seem to take that much from it. But when they really came to life, he noticed, was when they were in the bar after the session or having their cup of tea in the break, where they get to chat to their peers and really start to see see what was going on for each other and learn from each other and get ideas from what each other were finding challenging and succeeding in. But he tried to sort of create a structure for that to happen, and put it at the center of learning and development instead of just in the breaks. And that's where action learning came from. So he created, with action learning, a structured collaborative process that would use not theoretical sort of textbook examples, but real world experiences to help people learn. And what he found was that the learning that came from that, those two principles, learning from peers using real world examples, was much more impactful. The learning really stayed with people rather than sort of drifting away and being forgotten after the process. What he was able to demonstrate in the pit, so this is in the 1940s, so coal pits were really central to our energy supply in the country, and so he was able to do big studies to see what impact action learning was having, and what he was able to show was that the pits where action learning was being used were able to demonstrate not only a higher safety record, so that's to say fewer people dying, but also more productivity, 30% higher productivity. So that was the sort of the birth of action learning, and he went on to use it in lots of other contexts, particularly in the NHS, and so that's where it was born, really. Will you take me to the next slide, Charlotte? Thank you. So some of you are new to action learning, so you might have this question today: how does action learning work? What is it in practice? Where you start out with action learning is you need a group of people. So we call a group of people doing action learning an action learning set. Usually about 5 to 8 people, and usually, ideally, you'd have a sense of sort of peer relationship. They don't have to be doing the same job, but you try and avoid massive disparities in seniority, just so that people can feel relaxed and able to be themselves. So if you have, for example, a chief executive and someone much more junior, both of those individuals might feel that they have to sort of be on their best behavior or pretend to be really confident in their jobs. Whereas if you have a sense of peers, people are more likely to be confident to share what they don't know and what they're stuck on, which is what action learning is all about. So you've got 5 to 8 peers together in a room or sharing online, and then through a process that the facilitator will lead you through, you get to the point of being able to start to present problems. So one person at a time will present a challenge to the rest of the group to tell them what's on their mind. That might be a big opportunity they've got, or something that's gone really wrong, or a chronic thing that they're really struggling with in their role. They talk to the group about what's going on, to the set, and then the set does what's unusual about action learning is that the set does not jump in at that point and give them advice and share their experience and tell them what to do. Instead, they listen, and then they use questions that the facilitator will train them to use well, to help the presenter think about what's going on for them. And the thinking that they're going to do in that space is hopefully deeper and more powerful than the kind of thinking they do in a normal meeting, because of this space to think, because of the listening that the rest of the group is doing. So what you hopefully get in that reflective questioning space is time for the presenter to go beneath, to look at what's happening, zoom out, think about what assumptions they're making, what blind spots they might have, what perspectives they might be missing, to get to a solution and a way forward that is much more impactful and useful than what they might have been able to think of on their own. So they do that bit of thinking that might take 20 minutes or half an hour even to reflect on that question. Then they build an action plan from there. They say, okay, I've done all this thinking. I've realized I've had this blind spot. I've thought about the other person's perspective, whatever it might be. This is what I'm going to do. And they build a really specific action plan. This is what I'm going to do, when I'm going to do it, how I'm going to measure my success. Then you get to this second layer of learning that they're going to be able to have from the group, which is where the rest of the set, the action learning set, will start to reflect to the presenter what they've noticed while listening to the presentation. So they might share ideas they've had that the presenter hasn't mentioned so far. They might say that they've got experience that they can share that might be useful to them. They might share something that they've learned listening to the presenter for their own roles that they're going to take back, or they might provide some support or encouragement that would help the person kind of commit to their action plan. Then the third layer of learning comes from the fact that you're going to keep meeting. So the same group will meet usually 4 or 6 times, but sometimes for many years, to provide accountability for each other from meeting to meeting. So 6 to 8 weeks later, you meet again, and the people who have presented in the previous meeting will feed back to the group on what they've managed to achieve from the action plan that they committed to each time. So there's this loop of accountability that keeps the work moving forward. Okay. If anyone's got any questions about that, or if any of that wasn't clear, please just pop it in the Q&A section at the bottom and we'll come back to it. We'll have plenty of time to go through questions at the end. Okay, next slide, Charlotte. Just got a couple more to share. So, facilitator training, why does it matter? One thing that we see quite often, frustratingly often, is people say, oh yeah, I've tried action learning, but it didn't really work for me. Or organizations who have tried to use it, people have sort of dabbled in action learning, and what's happened is people have stopped turning up, or they're feeling like it's a waste of time. And usually what's happened there is that the facilitator hasn't had the chance to have some really good training to support them to use the process well. So the really common pitfalls we see of facilitators who haven't got the backup of good training are these ones listed here. So some facilitators struggle to set up a good sense of psychological safety. That's so core to how the group works. If people are going to talk about what they're finding most challenging in their jobs, or really struggling with, they need to feel safe in the space. And the facilitator's job is to set that up by building trust between the individuals there, by talking about confidentiality and setting up how that's going to work for the group, and then challenging issues as they come up so that people continue to feel safe through the work that they're doing together. So that's crucial and a common thing that people struggle with. Another challenge that some facilitators find is that either the facilitator themselves or another member of the group can end up dominating the discussion, or there's another sort of subtle group dynamic at play that makes it hard for the group to work together. So there might be a power dynamic at play, an age disparity or a gender disparity or a racial differences or whatever it might be, that means that there are some people in the room who are feeling unheard or not contributing more than the others or less than the others, that makes the work that people are able to do together less powerful, because some people are holding back, some people are feeling resentful, whatever it might be. So a facilitator needs to be able to work with those nuances and take the group along with them. The third bullet point there is the most common challenge that I see, which is facilitators get going and then the group starts working out well together, but gradually that core bit of the middle part of the process of action learning, where the group give the presenter reflective questions, starts to dissolve. So instead of asking really good questions and then listening to what the presenter is saying, people start to ask questions that are really advice disguised as questions, or they start to tell personal anecdotes about their own experience. And that sort of bit for the presenter to do some really original thinking starts to get squeezed, or disappears altogether. And then the action learning becomes just another type of meeting or another type of discussion, and not as useful as it could be. Another classic challenge is this a failure to hold them to that accountability loop. So the action plan isn't built properly, or it's not brought up again at the following meeting, so that can get a bit lost. Or there are opportunities for feedback that get lost. So we talk a lot in our training about the balance of support and challenge, and sometimes a less confident facilitator might feel that they don't want to challenge someone with some feedback about how they're working or whatever it might be, so that those opportunities can get lost. So what happens if you put all of those together, or even just one or two of them, is that the participants who have put aside hours of their time to come and do action learning come away feeling like it's not that powerful, it's not that useful, it's all been a bit frustrating or awkward, or they didn't get anywhere with their thinking, and so they just, it stops happening. So those are the classic challenges. If you can just give me my last slide, Charlotte, I'll just try and talk about how the facilitator can avoid all of that. When a facilitator is trained well and is able to do their job, what they can do is they can set the group up for success by creating a structured space. They train the group in what action learning is, how to use it, and how to crucially hold that reflective space for the presenter so that the creative thinking can happen. Then they role model that process. So they show the group by doing it themselves how to ask good questions, how to slow down, how to listen, how to resist jumping in with your advice so that the person can find a solution that works for them. And that way the group can really start to do some powerful work. The other thing that the facilitator who's been trained well can do is really make sure that psychological safety is maintained. I think Charlotte will talk more about this, but picking up on issues as they come up, speaking to the challenges in the room, speaking about the power dynamic, speaking about trust and confidentiality as you go through, to make sure that as challenging topics come up, the people continue to feel safe on that, on what's being discussed. They promote diverse perspectives, make sure everyone's being heard, handle any group dynamics as they come up, and support those accountable actions. So making sure that an action plan is built at the end of each session for each presenter, that can really be carried forward, and so that it's not just a talking shop, but something that has action in the real world. So that's the goal. That's what we want from action learning. That's what we want the facilitators that we train to be able to do. Okay, I'm going to hand back to Charlotte to think about what's the point of all this for organisations.
Cool, thank you, Daisy. So yeah, I hope that's given you an understanding of what action learning is, how it sort of runs, but also the important part that a facilitator plays. So I'm going to start to look at, okay, so if that is action learning, how does that support organisation, and what benefits are there for, well, not only organisations, but for individuals as well? And what can that look like practically, actually, in terms of when you're developing solutions around particular problems in the organisation? So action learning has a multiple different ways it can support, and I won't go through all of these, but if you look at them in the sense of, it really does help build sort of a culture of continuous learning and accountability. So the whole process of action learning is to work on real life problems where people can talk about it, and it's not just the presenter that gets obviously the learning from that. People just generally asking questions and being part of that session will take things away from it and think, oh God, actually, do I do that? Right. Or maybe I need to take that and consider that. It really does sort of look at, when employees feel that they've got ownership of their own development and are trusted to solve meaningful problems, whether that's from an individual or a team, it really does increase employee engagement and retention, because they feel like they're part of something than just the work they're doing sort of day to day. It helps from an agility point of view. Loads of organisations have to be agile nowadays in a VUCA environment, as you all probably have heard before. But the agility of being able to solve problems, move on, work with different people in different parts of the organisation, and look at it from a long-term perspective, in the sense of not just trying to fix something with a plaster, but what is the actual fundamental challenges, and how do we get to the bottom of it, so we can create sort of the longer term solutions to problems that organisations face on a day-to-day basis. It challenges mindset. So you go as part of sort of the sessions, because you've got such a diverse perspectives in there, and people are asking very diverse questions, it can really sort of help people understand from different perspectives what's going on. But it also, it does start to break down some of the barriers, because people start to understand each other better from being part of those sets and those groups. But ultimately, action learning is it does create accountability driven, which ultimately drives positive change, because people own it, people taking it forward, people are discussing what the challenges are and how can they proactively solve them, rather than obviously either looking up sideways for the answer. It actually, quite often, it's within people. So this is why action learning is so effective, because it creates a broad sort of support for complex challenges, but also builds mindset skills and what organisations need from individuals to continuously learn, develop, and help build those or the organisational performance as we go forward. On the side of it, there is loads of benefits for the individuals involved. The key ones is ultimately, it's time to actually come out of the hectic world of always having a crammed diary, meeting after meeting, or a massive to-do list, just to give you that space to step back and actually just take a second to say, am I dealing with this particular problem in the right way? It creates a safe space to be able to voice that opinion, but also then get some coaching and support from people around in order to help you, I guess, understand what's going on for you, but also find ways forward, solutions, new ideas, maybe new approaches you've not thought of. But that also then, from a shared learning and best practice, you've got people in the room that can sort of provide that sort of support and challenge. You can get constructive feedback from each other. It offers sort of helping each other to succeed. Feedback's a powerful tool for improvement, as we well know, and trying to refine and develop sort of your skills that you've got and leveraging your strengths. And individuals strengthen their core skills, such as problem solving, communication, teamwork, and ultimately sort of that peer-to-peer connection and development. It really does start to form connections and collaboration across the session. And if you set the sets up, it could be across organisations in terms of the way people have it represented from different parts of the business. So how can action learning transform organisations? It does it in several ways. You either build collaboration skills or you're breaking down barriers to drive innovation. So through building collaboration skills, you look at how do employees learn from each other, a shared knowledge and mutual support, looking at real world problems. So what are they experiencing day in, day out, actually in the organisation, but also it really helps from a leadership point of view, because if you're working with a set of leaders going through this, it's often quite isolating in certain leadership positions. But this gives them an opportunity to talk about, actually, this is what I'm experiencing in my functional area, and what can I develop and learn from that. And then sort of breaking down barriers even. So you can work from a silo perspective. Quite often organisations I've worked in the past, different functions are very siloed in the way they operate. And actually, if you're trying to deliver a project that goes cross-functional, it's not always the easiest. So actually, action learning can really support by bringing those people together, forming teams, and actually helping to sort of create sort of the challenges. So we'll give you an example. So when I was in regulatory space, we were trying to deliver stuff to operationals area, but we were obviously had different views from operational how that would work practically. So we had to create a team to sort of work together in an action learning set to find the best approach to sort of delivery of this. It can build resilience, so people will manage stress and adversity a lot better because they're not doing it on their own. They don't feel isolated. They don't feel like they can't talk about things. So it creates that opportunity to drive conversation about challenges that people are facing or the business areas are facing. But ultimately, you can work smarter and find creative ways. So it's not always about challenges. It could be that you want to brainstorm improvements. And how do you work with different functional areas and work on a project sort of specific element to try and brainstorm and get a better solution? So it can support in various different ways, but ultimately it helps teams feel empowered, collaborate, and really adapt and innovate in terms of the growth and creativity that's within organisations or what's needed in order to take performance to a different level. A question we quite often get asked is how and where do you apply it? So what could it actually support? These are the common ones we work with different organisations too. So we've developed it as part of leadership development programs, management development programs to underpin and embed the learning as along you go. Same with inductions. You can use it as helping people to transfer into a business culture because they can talk about it and their journey as they progress through that sort of induction phase. You can look for how you can look at solve strategic problem solving for complex issues. So that's really about tackling specific strategic challenges, such as addressing customer pain points or responding to industry challenges. And these issues really do benefit from action learning in the sense of, a group of people being able to talk about the challenges and have questions or reflections in order to drive a solution forward and actions. But yeah, creating a learning culture, it does really start to build the skills around reflection, development, and personal accountability to improve and go forward in terms of that. So there's various different ways you can apply it in the organisation, and we can help you with that. If you get a particular idea you think it could work, then we can support that. So what do we do? So we do a range of action learning support. So we facilitate action learning sets. So if you've got a group of leaders or a project team that you would like support as part of their challenge or their development, we can actually facilitate the action learning sets for you. We do action learning facilitator training. We do our basic, and then we do an advanced level, which is the recognised by ILM. We are introducing next year a masterclass for trained action learning facilitators to take their skills to the next level. And we also do supervision for existing facilitators. Quite often you're individuals in organisations that are facilitating, so we wrap around that support in terms of that. So if you find any of these useful, then please let us know. We're going to ask you another question from a poll point of view and say which in your organisation would be helpful, while we have a quick look at what questions that have come up.
Please do pop any questions that you have from anything we've said or anything else about action learning into the Q&A at the bottom. I've got one here from Jay. We'll just take a minute if anyone wants to have a think about any questions that they have. This is a nice opportunity to share a bit of expertise, not just from us, but I know there are other people here with good experience to share, so feel free to put any more questions in. Jay's asked, when facilitating the first set, how do you balance the competing needs of members to have a go and sometimes get it wrong with the need to maintain good quality non-directive questions? I find managing this balance essential to the success of groups experience, but it's tricky. Yeah, I completely agree with that, Jay. So this is this phase that facilitators go through of having to, you're training a group to use the process of action learning. So you've got to sort of teach them a little bit about what's a good open question, how does it work, to get them past the feeling of feeling like they've got to jump in with their advice. I mean, I think you're on the money with what you've suggested in your question, Jay, that it is a balance and a bit of a judgment call as you go along. I find that some people feel a bit taken aback by being corrected, by the facilitator and saying, oh, well, that question's a bit closed. So I try and keep it to a minimum in the first couple of rounds, but to intervene once or twice, just to give the group an opportunity to work together to take a question that might be a bit closed or directive and make it open. So I'd maybe ask another member of the set, can anyone else think about how we could ask that question in a more open way? And what I find is that if it's still a problem a couple of rounds later, I might allow time at the beginning or end of the session to work a little bit more specifically as a group, just on asking good open questions to give them a bit of practice before going back into the set. Would you add anything to that, Charlotte?
Yeah, I mean, the key bits for me also to build is probably the contracting up front, and a little bit of sort of the teach element, so they understand the best approach to questions and understand how that sort of set works. I think if you set it up that way as well, it really helps. Yeah, for sure. It's people get more comfortable, don't they, with it feeling like a sense, using action learning as a place where you can try and fail. The whole point of the action learning space is something where they can try and fail and practice. So you want to set up that sense of it being fine to give something a go. Yeah. Kerry has asked, where do we find further information about facilitation training, e.g. the cost and time requirements? So that information, Kerry, is on our website. So we do two types of facilitator training, I should say. One is an open program that anyone can join as an individual, which we run about every 6 weeks roughly. So that's information and costs and times are all on our website. And we'll send the link out to you after the webinar, probably on Monday actually. Or you can find it on our website if you're in a hurry. The other thing we do is we go into organisations and train facilitators in-house. That's to say, you would have a group of 5 or 6 people to train, and we'd come and do a in-person or virtual group just for you. So that would be you'd come to us to ask about cost, but the time requirement is the same for both programs. It would be either 3 or 4 days, depending on whether it's in person or online. Is that okay, Kerry? Let me know if you've got any follow-up questions there. We run slightly shorter days online just because it's hard to concentrate for a long day. So we run that over 4 days if we're working online. Okay, the third question we have here is what are the pros and cons of having a group from the same team or department so that they know each other versus a group where people come from different departments? It's an interesting one. Charlotte, shall I answer that, or do you want to? You go for it. Okay. I would say there's benefits to both. So where people know each other, you've got
hopefully that kind of trust established, and they can dive deeper sometimes because maybe they've got expertise to share. So you might find in the reflections round, that round's really helpful because people have got ideas to throw in because they know the situation the person's presented really well. The risks of having people know each other well is that there might be some existing dynamics at play. So you'd want to be really careful, not just in managing the dynamics in the room, but in setting it up beforehand in contracting to make sure that whoever agrees to be in that group, that trust is going to be possible, so that there's not an existing feud or something like that, or a big power dynamic that's going to make it really hard for the participants to relax and take part. On the converse, when you've got people from different departments completely don't know each other, you've got a really exciting opportunity to build new networks and new links and learn from perspectives that you haven't known before. So that can be great. It takes a little bit longer to build the trust, but it does come quickly, and we would work with facilitators so that they know how to build that trust quite quickly in the first session or two, so that people can start to do that work together. So I mean, I see both work really well. Yeah. Anything to add, Charlotte?
Yeah, they both work really well. The other way of doing it is project teams, or when they come together, trying to find an approach to delivery of a certain aspect or challenges that facing us to go. That goes really well as well.
And indeed, people who come from across sectors, right? You know, we do some groups where we've got, let's say, chief executives of different charities who are all coming together to have some time to think reflectively, and they don't know each other at all, or working to tackle the same issue. You know, lots of different people working on homelessness or working on climate change, trying to tackle issues across sectors. In fact, that's what we did in the military charities. We had groups of military individuals from different military organisations coming together to think about how to work effectively across that sector. So Sylvia has asked, yes, belonging to the same project can be considered as a peer relationship. Yeah, that's coming back to your comment, I think, Charlotte.
Yeah, because ultimately it's a common problem you're trying to solve, or a common outcome that you're trying to deliver. So it's creating that environment to ultimately have a very innovative and constructive conversation about common problems that might be coming up throughout the project, and being able to help each other to solve them. So the only relationship that we watch or have caution about when you're doing sets is manager and relationship. So not being in the same session as your manager, for example, because actually that you might be more guarded in that sense. So we try, that's the only watch out. But if you've got a great relationship, then it can work. But we do sort of discourage that, don't we, Daisy?
Yeah, although as you say, I've seen it work well where the trust is high in a team.
Yeah
Great.
Any other questions? Nope.
There we are.
Got a good variation in terms of what interests people most about action learning, so that's interesting to see. It's actually right across all of them, so there's not one that seems to be standing out. But if you've got any other questions, then please do give us. Oh, one last question. Here you go.
What are the advantages of certification in action learning? Yeah, interesting. Do you mean training as a facilitator, or do you mean getting something with an external recognition? I'm guessing the latter, because we've talked a lot about the value of training versus not training. Yeah, the external recognition. Yeah. So the program that we offer that's recognised by the ILM, the reason people take time to do that, well, there's a few reasons, but one of them is that to do it, you have to spend some time reflecting on your learning from our core facilitator training program, and then do a bit more practice as a facilitator, and then write about that. And all those processes of reflecting, practicing, and writing it up really helped you to embed the learning from the core program. So that's one key thing. That written piece is then assessed and externally moderated, which gets you some nice feedback that's helpful for your learning. And then you attend an additional session to do some more work on developing your practice and going a little bit deeper than you have based on the experience and other questions that have come up for you. So it takes your learning a bit further, and then you've got the external as a result of doing those extra pieces of work. you get the external recognition with the ILM recognized logo and our certificate. And some people find that helpful in selling them their services as an action learning facilitator when they've got credentials that they can put on in their email signature and on LinkedIn, to be able to demonstrate that they've got the highest level of action learning training in the UK. Anything to add, Charlotte?
I think it's just what you said. It really just sort of just embed and sort of get that sort of skill level up. It gives you the opportunity to come back and actually talk to one of us. Any challenges you found as you've done your first sort of facilitation. So it sort of helps embed that piece for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Fabulous.
Great.
Well, I think we can close from there, but ultimately, thank you for joining us. If you are interested in learning more, please do check out our website. There's loads on there. If you're thinking of using us for action learning, please do contact us and we can work together to find out how best to implement and support you with that journey. And the email's there, or it's on our website as well, or you can get in contact with us as well through LinkedIn. We can follow our LinkedIn page. That'd be great because we quite often put updates and offers on there as well. So please do give us a follow. But other than that, lovely to see you all and thank you very much.
Thank you.